Welcome to episode 1 of the Polldale podcast. Today I'm excited to welcome Ned Williams, who needs no introduction to the cattle world. He has been in it his whole life. Ned is from Polldale Shorthorns, just outside Dubbo in Central West New South Wales. Ned represents the 4th generation of Williams family to breed Shorthorn cattle at Polldale, a stud with more than 65 years of breeding history and a reputation of producing structured, sound, fertile, quiet temperament cattle that perform in both stud and commercial operations. Together with his parents, Kim and Liz, and with his wife, me, and now the next generation growing up around the yards, Ned is helping continue a family legacy that spans over 5 generations on the land. Having brought into his family partnership as a teenager and working alongside his parents for more than 16 years, Ned has then heavily involved in every aspect of the operation, from cattle breeding and genetics to pasture management, irrigation, cropping and business development. His passion for the breed has seen Polldale genetics sold throughout Australia and recognised at a majority of industry events. While the stud continues to attract strong support from commercial and seed stock operations alike, Polldale has become known for breeding practical cattle that thrives in real-world conditions. With a strong emphasis on fertility, longevity, temperament and performance. Under Ned's stewardship, the stud continues to invest in leading genetics, performance recording and technology while remaining focused on producing cattle that work for the commercial producers. Recent sale results and industry involvement demonstrate that the family ongoing commitment to improving the Shorthorn breed and delivering value to their clients. Today, we're going to be talking about the Shorthorn breed, the evolution of Polldale, and where it all began. Ned, welcome. It's taken me 3 years to get you on a podcast, but I am so glad that you are here with me tonight.
Thank you. That was one hell of an introduction. Thank you very much.
Ned, for those who may be listening for the first time, tell us a little bit about where Polldale started and the history of the Williams family.
It's a bit of a story where the Williamses have always been Shorthorns, and our family started with old Ned Williams, which is my grandfather. He was the first member of the original family to move over the highway, away from the Collie Road. And that was a pretty big move. In those days, it was horse and cart. It effectively isolated the family, so it wasn't just an extra 2 or 3 hours trip for that time in that era. It was really a big move. It was really branching out, and we settled to this area from old Jack Reed, who had Reedsdale, and Dar brought it off him. And Jack Reed ran about 20,000 acres all through this country. All around Dubbo all north of Dubbo was subdivided up from Jack Reed's place. So it's a lot of history that got broken up, and a lot of soldier settler blocks too, which were a mile by mile, were utilised through the area as well. So a lot of history there. It was very interesting.
So my understanding is Dar bought this block from Jack Reed using a soldier settlers package. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what he first did with the block when he got here?
Sure. So that was set up a mile by mile, as you would know, as a lot of the older generation would know too. So once that was set up, the area originally was cleared by Croatian families, and all through the area you see a lot of felled timber. All the railway lines were sourced in this area from the timber that was cleared by the Croatian families who originally moved out to Umundri. Umundri was one of the original waypoints for new settlers in the area, so that's how Jack Reed came to be when he owned the country and the settlers cleared the country and all the area. And when Ned Williams Dar, he moved onto this side of the highway. He steadily grew the area and the holding up just through buying, expanding through little blocks around the paddocks, which is why we have different paddocks all on different DP lots, because they're all culminated into one. And the country was pretty hard then. There was a lot of red ironstone, very hard dirt. We've had to do a lot of pasture improving over the years. I suppose in hindsight, it would have been easy to buy a country that had already had the work done to it. But because we're established here, we're holding here, we've had our cattle here, we've got a history here, it at the time made a lot more sense to improve what we did have. And the results were, I think Dar originally had about 20 to 30 cows and about 100 sheep, and that was enough to make a pretty good living in those days. That was all this sort of country could hold as well at the moment in a good average season. Now, in the modern times, we've effectively tripled and quadrupled the holding capacity just through modern farming practices, but mainly by improving the selection of grasses that we have in the area as well. So Dar's really the establisher of coming to this area, setting it all up, having his horses, having his Shorthorns, having his sheep, and really expand the area and putting the base infrastructure in that allowed him to make a living. A lot to be appreciative for and a lot of history, and I think it's important that we recognise that and appreciate where we come from too.
So Ned, Dar moved out here, started the block, started getting it underway, and then he married your grandmother, Dorothy. So tell us a little bit about what they then grew the block to be and the family they raised on it and how they continued with their Shorthorn herd. Basically,
our Shorthorns came from a commercial base. That's where a lot of our female lines came from, and that's where we've expanded. Now, Bidar was my great-grandfather. He was the one that started the Shorthorns to the Williams family. And Bidar had boys. He had Dudley, Arthur, and Ned, 3 boys. Ned stayed home and was really settled on the land. He did a lot of the work. Dudley and Arthur were away at school and they received in higher education. But all throughout their time, the 3 boys stayed with Shorthorns and they set up and did their own studs. Tara Lee, Marrington, and of course Polldale. Through that time period, the boys sort of made their own decisions in their own ways, the way they wanted to do things, which turned out really well, but they stayed a close unit. They helped each other, bred from each other, used bulls and those sort of things too. And they also shared horses too. Dar was really loved his trots and loved his horses and really liked to share that with his brothers and family and his friends too. But that's where our commercial herd comes from. And then when Dar was young and my father, Kim was young and Dar was obviously middle-aged, they branched out and got a few of the more female lines. One of those lines that I recently learned about was the Flora Kate line from Haddon Rig, when Haddon Rig had Shorthorns before they dispersed. That's where a lot of the other female lines came from too, like well-known studs as well as Rosedale down south. And it's just, that's why we name our females the Princess line, the Flora Kate line, the Polldale Loving line, so we can keep track of their heritage and where they've come from. We've noticed recently a lot of studs just have a name and that's that animal's name and they go back to such and such, whether we like to keep our female lines similar. So we have a Polldale Loving, the 233rd. She's the 233rd animal in that line, or it might be 133rd. It's hard to keep track. But she spans back generations and generations and generations, and it makes it a lot easier to track your lineage. And when you've been able to come into a family that's had such a long lineage and a lot of history, it's also important for you to have it as well. So, for our kids, for interest's sake, when they come along, it's easier for them to keep track of as well and recognise their history.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's really interesting when you're running it through the yard and you're familiar with the cattle. You can almost guess the genetics and the lines because of that knowledge and those records as well. So Dar and Dos moved on farm. They had the Williams line. So tell us about Kim's family and briefly about, them growing up on the farm and how Kim worked closely with his dad to build what the farm then evolved into.
Sure. So Dad and Dar really got along really well and they did a lot of work together. But it's in the family. There were 4 kids. Now, a lot of the kids took a bit of interest in the cattle. I think Dad, Kim, took a lot more interest than his other brothers and sisters. He really focused on that. And Dad obviously grew up doing a lot of work, loved his chooks, loved his pigs, loved doing the animals. The interest, I think, was always there. So it was really a natural progression for Dad and Dar to do a lot of the cattle work. But growing up, Dad definitely helped and really helped Dar give a direction of what he was doing too.
Yeah, so nice to have such a close partnership growing up through the years and really building the foundations of what is now Polldale. So then your dad met your beautiful mum, Liz. So tell us a little bit about those early years, as you know, they may tell it, and how the stud grew once they were absolutely locked in being here and pushing the farm forward to what it is now today.
Well, Dad, when he was growing up, had a lot of big ideas, and I think Dad was pretty hesitant, growing up through the Depression, and where the relationship with money was one of sheltered and scarcity. I think times have changed to the degree now where a lot of people have a lot more different relationship with money, and I think Dad really implemented that through, because he really got things going before, when Dad was young, that there was a lot, not trouble, but there was, the infrastructure wasn't on the property yet. So Dad really helped establish that by, having a set of yards that hold cattle, by having some good fences where if you wean calves, that they stay weaned during the course of the week and they don't get back through. Just things like that make your operation run smoothly. But that doesn't take anything away from the passion Dar had. He was a very good stockman, and what made him, I think, in my opinion, one of the better breeders that I think would do well to be recognised is he was a studman. He wasn't just a stockman. And that's not only realising what works, but how cattle are going to breed and how they throw just by looking at them and assessing them visually. Because a lot of the tools that we have today weren't available back then, but they didn't need to be available too. For instance, wet and drying your cows as they come through the yard, seeing what's pregnant, seeing what's got a calf, see what hasn't, see what's stayed dry for 12 months. A lot of that was done visually, and you didn't need to go through and preg test. It was, if a cow was infertile or a shy breeder, that could be picked up straight away visually. And a lot of those skills, I think, are still pertinent in today's society, particularly in the industry. I don't think there's something that should be scoffed or ridiculed or put down, because I think they had their place, and I think they still have their place for those who can, and those who can't rely on other things too.
So what else did Kim and Liz do as a partnership to make Polldale grow to how it is today?
So Mum married Dad, which is good. They got married to Dubbo. I was told their blossoming and romance started underneath a bridge, which we took a photo of. Unfortunately, it burned down the last few years, but it's good to get a photo of it before it did perish. But Liz was a Cobar girl from the Burke family out that way, and they too came off the land as well. Liz's mum studied nursing at Dubbo, and she was a trauma nurse, theatre nurse, I should say, in the Dubbo base for a number of years, where she saw a lot and did a lot, and definitely helped make the community a better place. I think it was a natural progression for her to move away from that onto the farm to help Kim run the place and feed the cattle. And because to do what Dad wanted to do, particularly with the studs, a lot of work. And if there were two people running it, takes a lot of pressure off. And once we started trying to crop, once we, at that stage, there was still sheep around too. Mum and Dad made a living and brought money in for groceries of the young family with us three boys by growing tomatoes and using fox pelts as well, which was a lot around in those days. So they generated an income, and they worked together, and they made it happen. And really owe them a lot for where Polldale is at the moment, and that's sort of how they got set up. And then it was just, it's a time thing. You mightn't have the money this year for what you want to do, so you wait and save up for next year. And once you get that done, that allows you to get this done. And then once you're able to get this done, that gives you more breathing room. And they just slowly knock things over and work on the farm one little bit at a time. And that's where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that wealth of knowledge, so many lessons would have been passed down from generation to generation. So is there any particular lessons that, you and your dad talk about, even in the running of the production of where the farm and the Shorthorn herd is up to now, that comes through those generations?
Oh, definitely. One of the big ones is you cull for fertility. So if you cull for fertility, you instill fertility in your herd. You get rid of your shy breeders. You get rid of your cows that have a calf and skip a calf, skip another calf, then have another calf. You get rid of all those animals that don't perform, because the country we had when the stud was young wasn't ideal. So it really put pressure on you to not only have the smaller herd. Like nowadays, we've got 300 registered studs, over 300. We have that as a luxury. whether it was back when Kim and Liz and Dar were in the infancy of the stud and really developing it, really pushing it forward, that wasn't a luxury. So you really had to be not only be careful of what you bred, you had to make sure that every animal was pulling the weight, and that's a calf every 12 months, a live calf every 12 months. So that's probably a big lesson, is culling for fertility, because it instills fertility in your herd. The other lesson's constitution, having cows that have character, that look female, big open ear, broad, strong muzzle, thick tail head. As you know, I like to pull up a similarity between John Travolta and his kids. Look at his kids and look at his chin. There it is right there. Just popped off John and went straight onto his kids. And that's a sign of constitution. That's a trait that breeds on. And if you know that trait's going to breed on, it means that animal's most likely going to breed on. And once you know that, well, you look for the animal with that constitution and those traits, and then you know that thick, strong spine, that fertility, that maternal aspects, that size appeal, that strength, that length, that structural character, whatever it is that may be, it's going to breed on. So constitution was a really big thing that I think we learned as well. But not only that, it was handling the cattle in the country. It was, you get up, a cup of tea, coffee, whatever's in your kettle that day. But you get out the paddock, and one of the big things you learn is what you should be thinking, and that's, okay, what stage of production are your animals up to? What are they doing? What do they need? Are they calving? Do they need extra nutrients? Are they in their third trimester? How are you going to manage their births and their pregnancies from then on? Are you going to cut back their nutrients? Are you going to cut back their feed so the calf doesn't explode in size? And then once they do calve, where are you going to put them? So right now we're calving down and putting them on crop, because animals that have gone through a dry period, just like we have, where only recently had rain, you have green grass and that going in them, particularly chlorophyll, that base nutrient. Animals milk better on it. Better milk, better growth. Better growth, better calves. Better calves, better weaning weights. Better weaning weights, better IGS figures. Better IGS figures, they perform better. And it's not saying figures are good, it's just saying that the data more accurately represents what you have in the paddock. And once you're able to do that, you make those little 1% choices, pretty soon you have 20%. You do 20 right things in a row, then, like a footy team, you do one thing correct a week, and at the end of 52 weeks, that's 52 things you've done right. And if they're 1%, that's 52%, you're halfway there. The rest is luck and narrowing things down your management. So that's another thing we learned too, is how to think and how to manage the herd you have. And anyone can be a farmer on a good day. It's doing the right thing when you're cold, you're wet, your back aches, you're at the paddock, you slip over, you lost your phone, all that sort of stuff. It's about doing the right things when it's not popular or easy to do as well.
Ned, one thing I've heard you and the family talk about time and time again is how important temperament is, and that's why you think the generations of Williamses has stuck with the Shorthorns, but also definitely something that you carry forward even in today's breeding plan, and that is the temperament and culling for temperament. So can you tell us a little bit more about that trait, why that's so important, and how to carry that through?
Well, temperament refers to an animal's handability, how they behave in a paddock where there's no pressure on them, how they behave in a paddock when there is pressure on them, how they behave when they're being hunted, when they're being yarded, and how they're approaching a cattle crush. There are some of the basic animal husbandry things that are measured, particularly in the new IGS system. That just gives you a base idea on how temperament's measured. Now, temperament can come in many shapes and forms. Some animals think a lot, some don't. Some overthink, some, of course, the other way. Some stay calm all the time, some are looking for something to be stirred up at, and some are fine and then they see something they don't like and then that's it. So temperament's something, and I think all people have come across an animal that they don't like, how they behave, and it's really something that's critical to us, not only as a stud, but also to us, Cart, when we're in the yards too. We've got young kids, my parents are getting older. Your parents and your family come down, you want the work environment to be as safe as you can. So it's sort of something that you culled for pretty extensively and that you didn't want, because you never want a bull that's sturdy going to a client, because that's a repeat customer you lose. Every bull that you sell or every bull that's used outside your herd is really a banner for how Polldale operates. And it's something you really need to focus on, and we have particularly more so now that we have kids. But culling for temperament has been really critical for us because it increases how your animals handle. The better the animal handles, the better they do generally. Because we've noticed you buy in, and when you trade steers, you buy in some steers that, it may not have been handled correctly. When you do handle them correctly, you see them settle right down. And that shows that their temperament's from an environment issue. It's not from a breed issue perspective. So there are other considerations that you have to assess too when you're looking at temperament and hostility in a breeding operation. But we cull very heavily for temperament. It's very important for us because when a client buys a bull or uses a bull or sees a bull or a cow of us, it's very critical that the animals doesn't carry on. And there's a big safety aspect to that too. As they go through the yards, if you can't handle them, you can't work them, then it affects your operation. And besides, you're never really working cattle exactly when you want to. You're working cattle when you have to a lot of the time. And when you have to, obviously, it might be the best time. You might have friends around, guests around. There might be other factors that you might be aware of. And if an animal's stirry, it just makes the whole situation a lot harder to deal with. A lot harder to run through the yards, plus it can be quite dangerous. So yeah, temperament's a really big thing to watch out for, and temperament's something we cull for and keep an eye on, because we don't want it has no place in our herd here at home, and it definitely doesn't have a place with anyone else either.
Yeah, absolutely. Ned, as the generations have gone by over here on Polldale, have the breeding goals changed? Yeah, so tell us what it was with Dar and Kim and then yourself. Where's the future of Polldale heading?
Well, to see the future, it's a good idea to look at the past. And at the past, we have what they call belt buckle Shorthorns. And the Herefords and Angus were there too. That means nothing really got over your belt buckle. And we're not very tall people. But what I mean by that is you look at all the old photos, you see a lot of the straw fluffed up, and fluffed up straw goes up about yay high, and yay high was about where their pizzles were. So you wouldn't see the bull's pizzle when they're pulled up in the beds. They were very short cattle, very stocky cattle, very soft cattle, and that their traits that were particularly prevalent in the early Shorthorns and early Angus and early Herefords too. You could throw a blanket over them and cover 10 head nearly. And those were the days when, a show was coming up, and Dar remembered saying, the show was a week away, Dubbo show. He said, we better go out and find a cow. So he'd go out and find a cow and break her in about 3 or 4 days before the show. And he could do that because the cows weren't that big. They're obviously not growth and they're not as strong as the other big, powerful cows. And, you could work around them. And in the weekend, you had the cow, and then by the end of the show, she was cane broken. Nowadays, you're breaking your cattle in a lot earlier, getting them to perform a bit better, you're putting a lot more feed in them, and obviously the performance is through the roof. Obviously, in the early times, when Dad started breeding, that's where the cattle were. And then a lot of foreign genetics came in, and that shot the performance right up. All of a sudden, you had cattle that were taller than the top of your hat. You had massive frame score bulls. Then, of course, you ran into calving problems and the ability to meet basic market specs like your fat coverage and your softness, which is critical when you're going in and out of drought. So a lot of those factors. So we've seen the cattle, the standards of Shorthorns go from here all the way up here and back again. And our philosophy at Polldale is the sweet spot's just always about somewhere in the middle. So a lot of trends come through the breed. We saw that with breed plan. Everything was breed plan, bleed plan, breed plan. You had to get those numbers right when you submitted all that sort of stuff. And we've always haven't chased that. We haven't tried to chase the trend. We've just tried to stay left and back a little bit. So people that were focusing on the trend or it didn't suit them would catch those clients in that market as well. Because everything goes through a bit of a cycle we've found, and the cycle then inevitably changes. You can see it with the introduction of IGS and the Shorthorns. IGS is here to stay, and everyone I think finally made their peace with that. Everyone's chasing that, and a lot of people are either right into it or they're right out of it, and that's fine. It's because at the end of the day, we've had these discussions with our clients, and I think at the end of the day, you've got to go in the paddock and you've got to look at your stock. If you don't like what you see, it makes it a hard day. If you do like what you see, you enjoy what you're doing. So it really comes down to where you are, what you're trying to do, the markets and goals that you're trying to hit, and where your herd's at. Because the bull that'd suit us probably wouldn't suit next door. And what would suit next door will probably do harm to us. So a bull that's good for somebody's herd isn't always necessarily good for the neighbours. So that's why we've placed so much emphasis on a female lines, because once you get that right, it's like a blank ball. You use a bull to add certain traits into your herd. It's like aiming a rifle as opposed to a shotgun. Rifle, you know exactly where the bullet's going. Shotgun, you're scattering everywhere. So that's generally why we're looking for those things too. But we've seen a lot of changes, and it's important, I think, to keep up with it. But if you dedicate yourself too much to single trait chasing, you can find yourself you're putting other people away, because not all your clients, not all people are looking for the same thing. So it's important to have a natural variation in the stock too.
Ned, when people talk about longevity in cattle, what does that mean, and what does that mean for our stud?
Longevity is a good one. Basically, longevity means how long, it generally refers to a female stays around. The more years she's there, generally the more productive she is. She has a calf every 12 months. So 8 years old, 7 calves, calving down at 2. 10 years old, 9 calves. But generally longevity in a base nutshell refers to udder, feet, and fertility. They're the 3 main ones. Now, the reason it refers to feet is because if there's a wrong angle in the hip, it shows at the knees, and you see it growing out in the toes. Down there, down at the toes. And if there's an issue there, my point is it will show itself as the animal ages on. In the udder, cows can generally break down there, and as they get older, the quality of the milk starts to go. That can happen quite early in the female's life. It can quite happen quite long. We've had 10 and 13-year-old cows milk very, very well. We've had 4 and 5-year-old cows that don't have any longevity that we've culled and got out of the herd because they're not performing well on their feet, udder, or the fertility. So the big 3. So we've culled for that as well. The general rule of thumb is, and you'll see this as well on the stability IGS figures too, but generally it's 4 to 6 years is what they're looking for. We prefer 6 to 8 years, because we like to have a big commercial focus on our base, not just a stud focus too. And the cattle that we use, that we take out of the stud just due to numbers, and if we've got enough of that line, then we don't need them in the stud. We put them in our commercial herd. So our whole commercial herd, both commercial herds, are stud bred.
Ned, you've said that you breed practical cattle that work. We've talked a lot about the history of the stud, of the Williams family, and about the female traits and the good breeding traits that we chase as a family and as a stud. And in our next episode, we're going to be talking a lot more about the bulls and about what makes a good bull. So thank you everyone for joining us for episode 1. We hope you've learnt along with us around the family history and found that really interesting. And we look forward to seeing you in episode 2.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Polldale podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and picked up a few tips and information that you might be able to take back into your operation. To learn more about Polldale Shorthorns, head over to the website www.polldalestudshorthorns.com, or give us a follow over on the socials. We're on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like to see the cattle in person, reach out to Ned and have an inspection, or we'll see you on sale day on our on-property bull sale. The sale offers a selection of quality stud shorthorn bulls backed by generations of breeding, fertility, temperament, performance, and longevity. For sale date, catalogue, inspection opportunities, please visit us over on the socials or send us an email. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. And share with a friend who you think might like to listen to this episode. Until next time, this is Katja and Ned Williams from Polldale Shorthorns signing off. We'll see you on the next one.